I don't know how many people are locked into college football throughout the entire offseason, but I do know that at least Dallas area will now be paying attention to only college football because there's nothing to cheer about when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys hiring Brian Schottenheimer. And the only thing to make this worse is that you actually believe that Luka Doncic is a worse player than Anthony Davis. Naturally, the fans don't, but unfortunately, the organization does. So welcome on into Sunday Funday. It's Cole Thompson here. We got a jam-packed show for you today, locked on in for everything SEC, including Brent Venables being all in on Oklahoma in 2025. What are realistic SEC expectations for these teams going into next year, what feels like a must-win season? And Matt Rule had some interesting comments when it came to spring football. Is this going to be the new norm that we see throughout the landscape of the sport? Real quickly, make sure that you like the video, hit the ring notification, and of course, subscribe to the channel because we talk college football every single day. Of course, we do Sunday Funday every single week, and it's free. So why don't you just go ahead and lock on in? That way you don't miss a single second of the action. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the socials, link in the description. Follow me at Mr. Cole Thompson. That way the back and forth banner can always continue. And make sure you check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. SEC Sunday Funday is fueled by FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. So it's really simple. Go on over to SEC Unfiltered. Go on over to FanDuel.com/SECU. Make your pick. $5. Lay it on down. You win that bet, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Join in the madness today. Don't miss out on the action anytime soon, especially with Super Bowl 59 right around the corner. Okay, jam-packed show for you. I do want to throw this question out at the very beginning of the show because we're going to close it on this. The trade for Luka Doncic is absolutely mind-boggling to me. I have never seen a trade that has made my jaw drop the way that it was so unconventionally unfair to one side in the history of the NBA, really into sports in general. So I want your opinion. What in the SEC is the equivalent of that type of trade happening? Let's just say that actually in the SEC, you could see these moves get done, where a player from a major program goes to another program that really isn't struggling, but also isn't probably known as one of the front runners to win the national championship. And maybe this is one that actually catapults you into that conversation if you just add in a piece. So leave your comments. I will get to the best ones at the end of the show. But let's go ahead and start things off with expectations going into 2025. The SEC is still going to be the SEC. Nobody should be doubting that the college football playoff won't have ample teams from the conference that are going to make a run to a national championship. But there are also realistic expectations next year, I think, for some teams. And honestly, for us to start believing into them, we have to believe that they are turning the corner in certain spots. So who are the teams that we're talking about? Number one is Mississippi State. And a lot of you are probably saying, why are you throwing Mississippi State on here, Cole? Well, remember what life was like before the Dan Mullen era? Sylvester Croom had 9 wins in 3 seasons. Then he got back to his winning ways in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, 8 wins. Then he was fired the next year. Since Mike Leach's passing, where a new era of actual Bulldog football was, the Bulldogs have gone 7-17 overall. They're 1-15 in conference play, and they have a loss to Toledo, a MAC team on the schedule. 2-10 in the first season underneath Jeff Levy, which was far from being the norm, even for a team that lost its starting quarterback and Blake Shapen, didn't have consistency at wide receiver, and inconsistent defensive play. But the thing is that I want to see if Mississippi State is going to stay at that same level it was underneath Dan Mullen, where 9 wins is plausible. 8 wins, getting to a bowl game, finishing somewhere in the top 25, making the Egg Bowl interesting is plausible. And I love the portal additions. People talk about how many people left Starkville, not about the people that came on in. 26 departures against 24 newcomers, including South Alabama running back Fluff Bothwell, who's one of my favorite players just in the portal in general. Florida State quarterback Luke Kromenhoek, Georgia wide receiver Anthony Evans, Brennan Thompson, who has an understanding of what Levy wants in this offense. Malik Scalia from Texas A&M comes on in. This should be a team that, at least on paper, looks more defined. The foundation was set. I think the culture and the identity was set out in Starkville. But now it's about actually getting to the wins. Can the defense be better? Because it can't get much worse. They ranked bottom 30 in every single category last year, including allowing 34.1 points per game. They were 131st in pass defense and 123rd in total yards allowed. Can you just have stability? I'm not asking Mississippi State to be a player for the postseason. I'm just saying, can you not be the new version of Vanderbilt where you're winning more than just games against Eastern Kentucky and UMass and you're not losing to an NIU squad? You have to get 4 wins next year, for my opinion. Southern Miss, Alcorn State, NIU, Arkansas, Missouri, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Florida. Can you win 4? Because if you do that, I think that you're trending in the right direction underneath Jeff Lovie. If not, you're going into a must-prove-it year 3, where I don't think it matters what the culture is, what the sustainability is, and what the buy-in is. You want to be a better program, you got to have the results on the field. Florida's another one. Florida retained Billy Napier, had buy-in from the locker room, never saw quitting this team, especially in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. You have Aiden Warner taking on over at quarterback, and you nearly pull off the upset against a Bulldogs team that won the SEC title. You got to 8 wins. But 8 wins isn't the standard out in Gainesville. It never should be also, especially with the talent that they bring in. We're talking about making the college football playoff. We're talking double-digit victories, making it to Atlanta, and at least competing for a conference championship because of what you have on the roster. I get it's a tough schedule. I understand that you have to play a new version of Florida State. You still got to face off against Texas. You still have to go travel to College Station to take on Texas A&M. There's ample talent that is going to be residing on the Gators' watch. But still, it's a second year of DJ Lagway at quarterback, and it's his first full year as QB1, going through the offseason, knowing that he is the guy that you're buying into. A lot of people like the offensive personnel that they're returning. I do. I think Jaden Ball is going to be one of the big breakout running backs in college football this year. Not the SEC, college football. Trey Wilson and Aiden Mizell plus Jacoby Jackson. There's a lot to like about what you see in terms of the personnel that you're going to have for Lagway to work with. 8 returning offensive starters, including 4 in the offensive line, with an All-American center and Jake Slaughter coming on back. 8 returning defensive starters. How are you not excited about what direction Billy's going in when you realize how much buy-in is in the culture? Yeah, you lost some defensive players, but they were rotational guys. Guys like Jack Pyburn. Guys like the guy that went to Alabama. I'm blanking on his name off the top of my head. He'll come back to me in a minute. But this is now Billy's roster. You have to realize that. It's year 4. Every player that is on this team was either selected by Billy, brought in by Billy, or told by Billy, we need you to stay around if you're going to be bought in to what we're doing for the long term. So I got to see it. If you can go 8-4 next year, I'm not saying that it's the worst thing, but when you finish with the top 10 recruiting class featuring talents like Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown, Ben Hanks, Ty Jackson, Walter Cruz, and countless others, you should at least be in every game. Florida is currently at the crossroads of college football, and they have to decide what they want to be. They're going to be a team that ends up getting wins over significant programs, ones like they had last year against LSU and Ole Miss to close out the year, or are they going to be ones that fall short of expectations and finish 7-5 and realize, nah, unfortunately, this is the culture that we've been buying into. It's only going to get worse from here on out. I think Oklahoma fits in this category as well. Brent Venables is calling plays in 2025. We'll get more on that in a moment, but I really like this move. He is all in on Norman for this upcoming year. This is his Roman Empire. And for all you the old folks that don't understand what that means, he'll be sitting in his rocking chair at 80 years old, wondering what the 2025 season was all about. It will be constantly on his mind, good, bad, or indifferent, because this is a defining year out in Norman. I love the hire of Nate Drelling. I love the hire of Wes Goodwin. I think both are really solid defensive minds that are going to fit well inside of the system. I think that Drelling was a really good defensive coordinator who got thrown into a crappy situation last year at Utah State and still would have been probably one of the better rising stars in the industry at 34 years old if he would have taken the job and been the play caller primarily at Arkansas State. But he comes on into Norman. He is now going to work hand in hand underneath what is, in my opinion, one of the better defensive minds in college football. And probably he's going to have a say in the personnel and how the state outlooks. I love the hire of Ben Arbuckle. I love the fact that you're going young. You're going up tempo. You're not afraid to start swinging for the fences. And this is a very balanced offensive approach. You can attack when it comes to what is the run game. You can attack when it comes to the passing attack. You can be very aggressive when it comes to the tight end play. And you landed your star quarterback in John Mateer that I think is going to be a plug-and-play addition and be able to teach the newcomers what the expectations are to run this. If Cam Ward can go from playing in Pullman, Washington to being in New York City for a Heisman Trophy presentation, why can't John Mateer fit the same category? The defense still has talent. The offensive line is a year older and a year wiser for Bill Beatenbaugh. They've added in multiple players in the transfer portal and recruiting that I think is going to be better. But you have to realize that 8-4 is never going to cut it at Oklahoma. And it shouldn't. It's a blue blood program. It's a program with sustainability, buy-in, culture, talent galore, and expectations that should never be put to the wayside because of you came to a new conference. I don't want to hear people say, oh, well, Oklahoma is just turning into Nebraska 2.0. No, Nebraska should have never been where it was in the Big Ten. And Oklahoma sure as hell has learned from those lessons to make sure they never end up in that situation with the Crimson and Cream out Memorial Stadium. And if Venables does go 8-4 in 2025, what does that team look like? Is it once again because of injuries? Is it because of close calls in top 10 matchups where a team gets the ball last and they end up punting, and unfortunately, you aren't able to put yourselves in the prime position to score? Is it just incompetence? Those are the things that I wonder about with this team. You have to have a winning record next year against these 8 squads: Michigan, Auburn, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Missouri, Tennessee, Alabama, LSU. If you can somehow go 5-3, 6-2, whatever it is against those teams, you've done your part. And offensively, I think that you're going to see Oklahoma turn the corner. Defensively, you're getting all the buy-in from what is Brent Venables going into 2025. And I love it. LSU is on this list as well. LSU has done more with less during Brian Kelly's time in Baton Rouge. Now, stay with me for a minute. I'll answer that in a moment. 2 10-win seasons, a win over Nick Saban in year 1 in Death Valley, a trip to the SEC championship game, multiple first-round picks, a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. He's done all of that with really no major expectations. Knew that there was going to be some pieces that were going to come on in. And also, you had a ton of players leave the program, not enter the program. Then last year, you actually do some things, go out in the portal, bring in some right pieces, change your quarterback position, change some things on the defense, go spend money on a defense coordinator and a defensive staff to kind of be the backbone of your team, and you go 9-4. And 9-4 should never cut it at a place like LSU. The big reason why is because there's no more Nick Saban. There's more continuity and there's more identity and honestly more parity in the SEC than ever before. You should be absolutely competing for 10 plus wins, an SEC title appearance, a conference championship, a first round bye. And if you don't get the first round bye in the playoffs, you better be one of those teams that's hosting a playoff game in Death Valley on a Saturday night in the middle of December, because that's what is expected and it should be required of the LSU head coach. You're one of only 2 teams that's returning a quarterback with over 4,000 total yards of offense last year. Multiple standout receivers are still on this team. Chris Hinton, you brought in Barry and Brown and Nick Anderson. What if they meet expectations? You still have Xavier Thomas. You still have Aaron Anderson, who was the hero of the Ole Miss game. It's a more stable run game with Caden Durham. It's a better defense going into year 2 of Blake Baker. They've brought in everybody for this team. Literally, they have left no stone unturned since losing Bryce Underwood to go out and add in premier pieces in the portal that are going to be sustainable and, more importantly, upgraded from the season that you had last year. And you also bring back 2 veterans in the Honky Badger and in Harold Perkins, where you just got to make sure they find a certain role for each other. The best part is that Brian Kelly has finally understood the assignment. Look at his staff this past offseason. One of the biggest blessings, I think, for Brian Kelly going into year 4 is he gets it watching as Notre Dame is punching its ticket week in and week out to the next stage of the postseason. He's added in players and personnel members that have ties to the state of Louisiana. Alex Atkins and Lance Guidry coming on in as assistants. These are 2 names that are highly respected out in the Bayou. And on top of that, you also still have guys like Blake Baker. You still have guys like Joe Sloan. You have countless names in the in the recruiting department that understand what it is to be about Louisiana. And this is an ingrown state that has premier talent. LSU should not be losing players from anywhere in Slidell to Monroe to Baton Rouge to New Orleans, anywhere in the state to other programs in the SEC, because they have the personnel to do so. And they got to be able to start off fast. We're now talking about LSU not having a week 1 victory since 2019 when Joe Burrow made history. They got to get a win in week 1 in Death Valley. And let me phrase that, the other Death Valley for the title of Death Valley. And what's going to be a battle between my QB1 and Kate Klubnik and my QB2 and Garrett Nussmeier. Texas A&M, you're on this list for one reason. I'm very proud of you, actually. If you actually talk to many people that are in the A&M community, I just want to say congratulations. You finally reached the realistic expectations. Knowing that 8-4 is going to be the punchline until you get over that hump. Here's the problem. Unfortunately, the national media has refused to do that. So many people are putting A&M in their way too early top 10. So many people are saying A&M has the talent and the personnel to turn the corner. And you guys are all like, hey, let's get to 9-3. Let's get out of this 8-4 shindig for a little while before we actually start really believing that we've reached that next step. Unfortunately, A&M does this one thing every single year where they crush it in the transfer portal and on the recruiting trail that people put the wagon before the horse. And they're doing it once again. Marcel Reed, another year in the system, another year with Colin Klein. And now he is truly QB1 moving forward. Connor Wigman's off to University of Houston. Wide receivers, in my opinion, kind of upgraded. Casey Concepcion, one of the best playmakers and one of my favorite players just all in college football, now going to be your go-to target. You also have Mario Craver. You're going to get back Micah Hudson, who I believe was one of the more slept-on pass catchers coming out of high school during the 2024 recruiting class. You have some younger names that are still on the roster. You brought in Jerome Miles, the wide receiver from, I think it was Las Vegas. You still have some really overall good players, including Terry Bussey, that could be a two-way defensive and offensive player. Your offensive line is still very stable. You have a solid run game with Le'Veon Moss, who could lead the SEC in rushing next year. And if it's not him, it's going to be his counterpoint in Ruben Owens. It's a system that fits for Colin Klein to be successful. And you fix your defensive woes by at least adding in talent that is going to better the depth. But we're still hearing this time and time again. How many times did we hear this underneath Jimbo Fisher? How many times did we hear this underneath Kevin Sumlin? How many times did we hear that Texas A&M was right there at the finish line in the red zone and about ready to punch it on in for 6, and then it's a fumble that ends up leading to an 8-4 finish and a bowl game appearance in the Gator Bowl down in Jacksonville versus a college football playoff appearance? That's Texas A&M. That's where this team is. That's where this roster currently resides. And until we actually see them kind of meet those next goals, as Texas continues to win in the SEC, LSU looks like it's going to win in the SEC, as Oklahoma may be willing to turn the corner, as Ole Miss takes that next step forward, South Carolina takes that next step forward. This is Texas A&M. And unfortunately, for the fan base, who is loyal as all hell, Aggies believe in the culture that is set there. They're starting to realize that until we actually prove it, we have to just endure the 8-4 jokes. And finally, Auburn. It's year 3 for Hugh Freeze. I know what the expectations are on the Plains. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't realize that Auburn is the toughest job in college football. Because for years, not only did they have to face off against Alabama and Georgia as their 2 rivals, they also had to recruit against them in the same vicinity. And they didn't have the results to back it on up. But that wasn't changing out in Barner country. No, they actually believed that they should be winning those recruits. And sometimes they did. Sometimes they were able to bring in better classes than people expected. And what are we seeing once again for Hugh Freeze? Bringing in the right classes. Back-to-back top 10 recruiting classes. But he's 11-14 in 2 seasons, and he has 1 top 25 win, and it came in quadruple overtime against a Texas A&M squad that was starting to fall off its wagon. They exceptionally got better in the portal class. Eric Singleton comes on in. That was the number 1 wide receiver in the portal. Jackson Arnold, who I think is a much more stable fit for this offense that Hugh Freeze wants to run. They have ample depth on the defensive line, on the offensive line. They have some very good up-and-coming defensive players. And they have a really good coordinator in Hugh Freeze, DJ Durkin, that I believe is probably one of the more slept-on personnel members in college football. But at some point, the pantry spoils. And if you're not making the recipe with all the ingredients needed, they're eventually going to hire a chef that does. That's what's going on currently at Jordan-Hare Stadium right now. Everything is there to be successful. You have the offensive line, you have the depth, you have the players, you have the personnel. You have kids that are looking at Alabama and Georgia and Florida and Ole Miss and South Carolina and Texas A&M and saying, I want to be on the Plains. I want to be in this system. I want to be around this program and this identity moving forward. Now the only question is, do you have the right cooks in the kitchen that are going to be able to make a sweet dish that takes you to that next stage? It's year 3 at Auburn. You don't get many other opportunities after that to be able to kind of prove yourself and turn in that right direction. But I guess we'll never know. But those are my teams I'm looking for in expectations for 2025. Let me know in the comment section down below. Who do you think that you're actually probably putting out there? Real quickly, this episode of Sunday Funday is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59, 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether you're predicting the first touchdown, who will take home the MVP trophy, or even the coin toss, FanDuel makes an easy place for your bets to feel the thrill of every moment. With live betting all game long, you can jump on into the action, adjust your bets, and ride the wave to excitement from kickoff to the final whistle. Plus, make Super Bowl 59 even sweeter. The new customers at FanDuel can score $200 in bonus bets when you make your first bet. So just place a $5 bet down, and if you win, you get $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head on over to FanDuel.com/SECU to bet with FanDuel today, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. Disclaimer: must be 21 and plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit is required. Bonus issue with non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after the receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, that was a mouthful. Let me go ahead and have a sip of water just real quickly. Actually, it's not water. It's an energy drink. Somehow I have to have the energy to be able to continue to do the show. If you're still watching, real quickly, like the video, hit the ring notification, subscribe to the channel. Make sure that also you're following us in the actual chat, so that way you keep up to date with everything that we're doing here on the channel moving forward, and help us continue to grow towards 20,000 subscribers. We are right at the finish line, roughly about 255 subscribers away. So if you know somebody, you like somebody, make sure that you tell them to go ahead and tune into this program moving forward. That way they continue to get their nonstop action of the SEC throughout the college football offseason. And yes, unfortunately, there is an offseason. Hugh Freeze, my apologies. We're not going to do Hugh Freeze. We'll get to that later. 3, 2, 1. Got to do it for cutting up purposes. Brent Venables is calling plays in 2025 for Oklahoma. So there was rumor and speculation that Jim Knowles, the defense coordinator for Ohio State, was going to lead the program after the national championship and head on down to Norman. He had experience working at Oklahoma State, but then he ends up taking the job in State College. And now he's working with James Franklin in what is hopefully going to be the year where everything actually goes right for Penn State. But Oklahoma still has to make some hires to its defensive staff. So yesterday, it's announced that Nate Drelling, the defensive coordinator at Arkansas State, who previously worked at Utah State, and Wes Goodwin, the former defensive coordinator at Clemson, are joining forces down in Norman with Brent Venables. But Venables is going to be the primary play caller. Talked a lot about adding Nate and Wes to the roster. Also said that it was a very good move for the team moving forward. But he also said, I've reflected on all facets of our program over the past several weeks. Since I have been hired as head coach, we've carefully assembled the defensive personnel and scheme that is suited to compete at the highest level. We built a deep and talented roster ready for this moment. I have high expectations for our program and will do everything in my power to achieve the goals to our players. To that end, I'll be taking over defensive play calling responsibilities for 2025. Now, what do we make of this move? Just all in general. Me personally, I love it. I think it's absolutely the right call at this point. Because when you think about Brent Venablables and how he got the job down in Norman, Oklahoma at Memorial Stadium to take on over for Lincoln Riley, what was the thing that stood out? It wasn't his former head coaching experience. It wasn't the fact that he had experience actually leading a team or a roster or building up relationships out in the program. No, it was that he was a defensive play caller, and a damn good one too. Helped win a national championship at Oklahoma back in the early 2000s. Helped win 2 national championships at Clemson underneath Dabo Swinney. One of the better recruiters in the country. People were talking about him with his X's and O's and scheming up, and they said that he was a genius at the sport. And now it's year 3 or year 4. My apologies. It's year 2 in the SEC. And you have to realize that what are the expectations out in Norman? Compete for an SEC championship. Compete for a college football playoff berth. Compete for a national title. Don't play second fiddle to anybody. And you shouldn't. It's Oklahoma. It's a blue blood. It is a program that deserves the damn respect that it has earned over the last 8 decades. And you want to continue that. They knew what they were signing up for in the SEC. And what do we have as a copy for Brent Venables so far? Well, he went 6-7 in year 1. He had a breakout 10-win season in year 2. And in year 3 in the SEC, a 6-7 performance, but really only one great signature win over Alabama. An Alabama team that struggled to beat up on a Michigan squad that was out of all of its talent in the ReliaQuest Bowl, and they were at near full capacity. That's what we were dealing with. So if you have an identity for the program, why are you not going to go all in? And that's what I think the main point that we have to realize here, ladies and gentlemen, is that this is Brent Venables' Roman Empire. This is his identity. Whatever happens this season will be on Brent Venables, and that's the way it should be. So many people are trying to figure out, is Venables the right guy for the job? Is he only going to be a CEO approach? Is he only going to have an identity with the defensive side? Is there ever going to be a consistent balance on the offensive personnel? To which I say, you'll get your answer this year. If Venables is the one calling plays and he's still able to do the due diligence of a head coach and be able to work in the daily duties of recruiting and selling the program and building an identity, and then the defense continues to stay at the same trajectory it was underneath Zach Alley, well, then what's the problem here? There is still a very solid overall personnel that's coming on in. And more importantly, even though they are losing talent, the way they've been able to regroup with the transfer portal and the young up-and-comers, I don't believe Oklahoma's going to miss a beat next year. Last season in the SEC, first year, finished 19th nationally and 5th in total defense in yards allowed. They were also top 25 in scoring defense. And you got the architect of this unit still taking on over next season. And now he's going to have the final say. Meanwhile, Nate Drilling, who I believe is a rising star in this industry, is going to get acclimated to what is Norman football. He's going to be able to learn the ins and outs, the intricacies of what you want in a guy like Brent Venables. And in a year from now, if Brent Venables still is the actual head coach down in Norman, well, here's the good news. Drilling, I think at this time, is probably going to take that next step forward. He still is probably going to be able to now get to have a say in the play calling. And what if this is just another element and another branch of the Venables coaching tree getting opportunities elsewhere? Wes Goodwin, another guy that maybe is not a great play caller and certainly had his lulls this past season at Clemson, one of the worst run defenses in college football, or at least in the Power 4 programs. But that doesn't mean that he's not a good defensive mind. And you're putting all these pieces together out in Norman, where defense is the backbone of this team in a new era of SEC football. And you're telling me that they can't finalize it and put everything together to where 8-4 is possible, 9-3, maybe even put yourself in a better position to where you're at least having your defense control the games. And then you let your offense do what it needs to do. Ben Arbuckle comes on in from Washington State, and he just helped a guy in Cam Ward get to the New York City, or at least become a hot commodity on the portal market. And then he does the exact same thing with John Mateer a season later. And John Mateer now is not only the returning talented quarterback with the most touchdowns in college football, but he also has a good understanding about what Ben Arbuckle wants. It's like having a second coach on the field, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think that people realize that. You got a dude that understands the most influential position, and he gets every single little detail, minute problems, and can turn the corner instantly and put you in a position to where your team is now able to have the same balance and direction. And the thing that I love about this is that, again, quarterback and OC speaking the same language. Now you get to teach that down to everyone else in the building, from the offensive line to the wide receivers to the tight ends to the third stringers that may eventually have to step on up like we saw last year out of Norman. Everyone knows what the assignment is for this program. So I see no fault here. And here's the other part that I really want to bring on up. We talk about Oklahoma and how Brent Venables is now calling plays, and how Brent Venables is the one who has to be able to meet expectations. How Brent Venables, maybe he's not the right guy for the job. But we do this all the time in football. We do this in the NFL too. What happens when the offensive head coach is calling plays? Because you know Josh Heupel is the one calling plays out in Knoxville. You know that Lane Kiffin's the one calling offensive plays out in Oxford. You know that there's other coaches in the past that have absolutely called offensive plays. Look at what's going on currently right now down in Tallahassee. We watched as last season Mike Norvell called plays. Eli Drinkwitz has called plays out in Columbia. So why is it a problem that a defensive coach is calling plays, but an offensive coach just gets to walk on by and say, oh, no, it's okay? I think this is a really good move for a ton of reasons. The first is, this is now Venables' team. If Venables is going to go down with the ship, he is going down on his terms, on his standards, on his beliefs. He sees a vision of where this team can go. And if it doesn't meet it, well, the only person to blame is himself. You can't say, oh, well, it was the offensive play calling or it was the defensive coordinator that wasn't in a really good spot. No, you're the defensive play caller. This is your team. This is your baby. And if it doesn't work on out, Oklahoma has a reason to say, we have to go in a different direction if we want to be that next premier program in the SEC. They can do that. And guess what? They probably will, because they should, because there are realistic expectations out there. But what if things end up panning out? What if, again, you still see Venables act like the CEO? He ends up being the guy that people believe is good enough to sell the program and the identity of Sooner football. And he lets Ben Arbuckle call the plays on offense. And he lets the offensive personnel work together. And he has a little bit of a say, and he's understanding what is going to be the play design. They're going to have what is the actual formations and what are going to be the play calls. And he has a say in that. But when you look at that, what are you seeing? him still just take control of the defense and let the offense be its own entity. And they end up going 9-3 next year. And maybe they don't finish in the college football playoff running, but they upset a couple teams. They beat Missouri. They beat Tennessee in Knoxville. They beat Alabama a second time. They beat Texas in the Red River Shootout. And those are 4 wins against potentially ranked teams. Is that not sustainability trending in the right direction? And then you get a bowl game victory and you have 10 wins. And now we're back to back looking at what Venables has done. 6-7, 10-3, 6-7, 10-3. Is that not good enough for year 2 in the SEC to at least know you have, number one, the right guy, the dude who understands what needs to be fixed with this program, and number 3, and probably most importantly, growth in the conference, to where year 3 now is where it all comes together. And John Mateer doesn't enter the NFL draft, and you have a ton of defensive players that are coming back in for another season because they love the culture out in Norman. And once again, you're right back in the running to be a team that ends up making it to the college football playoff and maybe wins an SEC title in year 3. All those things are possible. Everything is on the table, which I can appreciate. If you're going to be the one to have to face the music, you might as well do it your way. Billy Napier did it his way last year. Guess what happened? He ended up getting one more season to kind of turn the tides and put himself in a great position. And the buy-in from the culture never was gone in Gainesville. If the buy-in of the culture doesn't leave Norman, if the offense can take that next step forward with John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle, if the defense still is one of the more sound units in college football and in the SEC for 2025, you got the right guy. I believe Brent Venables, it's still too soon to decide, is he a good head coach or a bad head coach? It's 1 year in the SEC. It's a small sample size where a roster was completely depleted and he lost ample talent in year 1 to year 2. He lost an offense coordinator. I still think that this story has not been written on Brent Venables' tenure in Oklahoma. I think that the next chapter is going to be the defining point to where, are we reaching the end of the book or are we expanding? But we aren't there just yet. So for anybody out there that wants to go ahead and say, this is Brent Venables, this is what will define his season, I completely agree with you. But the defining point of the season doesn't always have to be a negative outlook. It sometimes can be one of the biggest positive outlooks that we see in college football moving forward. That's just my 2 cents on the situation. I think it's a really good move. I have no issue with it whatsoever. I think Venables is the right guy for the job. I think he's going to do wonders working with this defense. And he's going to turn out 2 really good coordinator options in the future for other teams. That's my 2 cents on the situation. By the way, we got over 400 people watching right now. So if you could, just like the video, hit the ring notification, and hit that subscribe button. It takes literally like 2 seconds to do so because we're on the race to 20,000 subscribers. I'm not going to stop talking college football anytime soon. If you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or if you're a Mavericks or Cowboys fan, you might as well not pay attention to the to the NFL or to the NBA for like the next 5 years. So this is the only place that you should be. And we're on the race to become the number 1 SEC entity in college football. So just make sure you like the video, hit the ring notification, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Matt Rule had some really interesting comments about the future of spring football. And he brought it up in a different way that I thought he was actually going to. So when you read the storyline, it's actually not as negative as it comes out to be. He's talking about spring football being moved back, getting rid of the actual spring in the portal window of what is usually March and April. And he says, I want to be able to have players on campus for the entirety of all of spring football. And I want to get them caught up to pace, which I can understand. And he talks about tampering and how tampering is a big deal because of players that are going to lead the program that hurts a team. And I brought this up. Will this change in the SEC? Will this now be something that becomes a normal entity in the SEC? Because we've heard before Hugh Freeze bring up spring football and how he doesn't want to see his players get hurt. So what do? You should probably go out and add a game against a G5 program or an FCS program. And that end up being your spring football. So you get to go up against real competition and you get to see your team actually hit against one another and you don't have to worry about injuries or any of those things. So I get the point there. Here's what I will say. I understand Matt Rule's point for 2 reasons. Number one, when it comes to treating it more so like an OTAs when it's in June and July, it's because if you want to get those players on the campus. So what if there's a 5-star offensive tackle that you believe is going to be the difference maker and a day 1 plug and play addition to your squad? And he's not going to graduate on time. He wants to stay and he wants to go to his senior prom and he wants to go ahead and hang out with his friends one more moment before his life is turned to college football every Saturday for the next 4 years and route to hopefully becoming an NFL player. And this is the end of his life. This is the end of the story that he once knew. Well, you still have to go through spring realizing I don't have that left tackle. I don't have that dude that's going to be able to run the personnel or learn the dialect that we need for us to be successful going into 2025. And this isn't just at Nebraska. This could be at Texas A&M. This could be at Texas. This could be at Auburn. This could be anywhere in the SEC. So when you run the OTAs in the summer, the kids are there. They have nothing else to do. When school ends and they graduate high school, they travel on into college and they're in the workout regimen. They're in the daily meetings. They're in the film study. And you're able to go ahead and have those relationships form to where they're caught up to speed. And it's not like they're floundering by the time that you get to week one. And the other part is tampering. Tampering's not going away anytime soon. I can tell you right now, you will continuously see more and more and more players be told that their role will expand if they enter the portal. It will happen until the cows come crying home. It is not changing. But when you do it in the summer, what happens is that the portal quote-unquote window would be done. So your roster is loaded on in. Because everyone thinks about how, a player is leaving to better their chances, and they should. Absolutely. I'm not denying that at all. Just like I don't deny that players should be compensated for how they've been able to put their bodies on the line. They absolutely deserve to be paid. But when you think about it for a minute, we only talk about the player leaving, not the program that has to replace the player. Because when you leave open a roster spot, somebody's got to fill it. And so if somehow there's 3 or 4 wide receivers down in Nebraska or at LSU that realize my role is not going to expand if I'm playing in this system moving forward, if I'm playing in this unit, I got to find something else to do. I got to go elsewhere. Well, cool. They end up going to Tulane, or they end up going to Troy, or they end up having a breakout season for Virginia Tech or maybe Vanderbilt. And that's good for those programs. But now you have to go ahead and regroup your roster. How do you fill those holes? And then you're tampering and you're hurting other teams. And then those teams are now getting hurt. And they're now having to add in talent from whether it be the FCS level or go from a walk-on or bring in somebody from Division II. And their team now is hurt because of it. And they end up having a crappy season. So I get the point here. The thing that has always bothered me is that I believe we should have one transfer portal window. I've always believed this. And I don't care if it's after the college football playoff. I don't care if it's after the spring. I don't care what it is. But I believe that we should have one transfer portal window for 3 weeks. You have 20 days to decide if you want to go enter the portal. And then during those 20 days, you also have to find your next home. Or you have to sit and wait out. Like Jaden Rashada right now is sitting and waiting to figure out what is the next course of action for him and where he's going to land in 2025. He's been in the portal for over a month. He should be able to have a limit in saying, if you don't end up getting that spot, well, then you have to sit out. And then you have to take those responsibilities. I'm also a believer that when you transfer, you should get one transfer with immediate eligibility. And then afterwards, you have to sit for an entire season. Or you have to properly be compensated when it comes to what is your overall revenue when it comes to the NIL deal. And if you don't meet certain criteria in your contract, you have to be able to get that money back. I believe those are things that have to happen. But I get where Matt Rule comes from. This could be a change. Now, there are some negatives to it. If you know anything about Nebraska football, I know we're talking Nebraska football, but this helps with the SEC in general, you know what the market looks like when those games are being played in the spring. The spring game out of Memorial Stadium in Lincoln draws in over 60,000 people season every year. The A-Day game at the University of Alabama, for many people, draws in over 50,000 people just throughout the atmosphere. I also believe that when you look at like A-Day down at Auburn, or you look at Ole Miss's spring game, you look at Mississippi State spring game, Missouri spring game, a lot of these teams end up having those spring games and they become a dialect to their program because for some, that's the only amount of time that they're able to actually see their program. They actually are able to see what direction their team is going because they can't afford tickets during the regular season. So the spring game has a very big positive connotation to the world of college football. And it does for the fan base. And it does for the actual revenue of the university and for the program. So I don't think you can take away spring games either because of, unfortunately, if you're taking away the spring game, whether it be out in Austin, whether it be in Baton Rouge, whether it be in Como, Cola, whether you throw it out in Blacksburg, Virginia, those games still have meaning to a lot of those fans. And it's a way to honor the previous teams. I can just tell you right now, A-Day at Alabama every single year. We would always see the captains come back from the previous team, and they would have their mark made at Denny Chimes Stadium with their footprint and with their cleat, and then they would sign off. And that was a big deal. You also got to see the growth of your coordinators. 9 times out of 10, your head coach isn't the one calling plays or doing things on the sidelines. He's actually just sitting and watching what does the offense look like? What does the defense look like? So it allows your coordinators to get pretty comfortable in adding in that next layer of their game to whenever they become a head coach, if they're lucky enough to understand what is actually the entirety of the overall demeanor. So I just look at that and I say to myself, spring games still need to happen. Are we going to see change with the spring games? Probably. I think we're going to have to, especially when it comes to the tampering period, especially when it comes to NIL playing a major factor, where you feel like that just because if you're not winning your reps and you're stuck with the second teams, you decide to enter the portal. I believe all those things are going to change very soon. I do. And I'm not sure what the belief is and what we're going to have to be able to make these differences to where we make sure that spring games are a focal point, but we have to make spring games still a focal point at some moment of the world of college football because there's value there. I see where Matt Rule is coming from. The tampering, we got to be able to tone it down. When it comes to what is losing players to the portal, we got to be able to control it down. When it talks about things like bringing in guys who are currently still in high school and getting them caught up to speed, I understand all those things. But we don't need to rid ourselves of the spring games. They're important to college football. More importantly, they're important to the fans that are actually the ones that are buying into the culture and are giving you the money every single Saturday because they want to see the fruits of their labor of their team continue to transform. Just my own couple thoughts on it. I believe that we still will have a spring game, but there are some things I need to see change. We really do. Okay. I do want to talk about this before we move on to our final subject. There has been something that has bothered me with a lot of people, and I understand if you don't believe me when it comes to this, but it's all about Arkansas. So Arkansas football fans, let's come here for a minute. I got a question in my DMs not too long ago saying, why do you hate Arkansas football? Because every single time that I ever see your face on this network, you're the one that is speaking negatively of the Hogs. And I'm just going to be completely honest. I don't hate Arkansas football. If you're a Hog fan watching right now, I want you to realize that I actually care about your program probably as much as you do. Because I love Arkansas football. I love the fact that there is something out in Fayetteville, that there are fans that flock to the stadiums, even in disastrous, dreadful years of expectations and unfortunate mediocrity, that you still get the belief from the fan base, that you still get the belief in the program. Like for years when I looked at Tennessee football, Tennessee was filled to the brim, kneeling every single Saturday with countless talent and names and personnel members and people that believed in volunteer football. I thought it was egregious that we continuously saw the Volunteers, unfortunately, never be able to get over that hump when Philip Fulmer left. They weren't able to turn the corner, put themselves in a great position. And they had the Derek Dooley era, and then they had the Butch Jones era, and then they had the Jeremy Pruitt era, and they weren't able to ever sustain themselves. And now we see what they're doing going into a second 10-win season underneath Josh Heupel, and the buy-in is through the roof. They continuously still believe that the team can turn the corner and the best is ahead. But they never bought out of the buy-in in Knoxville. But I questioned myself every single year that I would go visit Knoxville. I would go see a game out in Neyland and say, why are people still believing that this could be something that is changing for the better? That's my thought with Arkansas right now. I don't hate Arkansas football. I want Arkansas to be good. But what does Arkansas want to be? Because right now, every single season, we think about it. Well, they're content with being 6-6. Is that really the case? Are you really saying that you're fine being a team that just gets to bowl eligibility, losing games to teams like Texas A&M out in the Southwest Classic, not being able to meet expectations when you take on Vanderbilt or having a close call against Kentucky, but you win that one and you say, whoa, Sam Pittman got us through this part. That's where I'm at with Arkansas. I want Arkansas to be a team that constantly is competing for 9-win seasons. I want them to be one of the top 30 programs on the recruiting trail. I want them to be a place that is known for players going into the portal, not exiting in the portal, not seeing talents like Luke Haas and Patrick Cadis say, you know what, this place isn't meant for me. I'm going to go down to Oxford, Mississippi, where they actually know what they're doing with portal classes. And they get better because of it. And then when they go off to the NFL, they're the team that we talk about being the one that represents them because they end up hitting their stride at the right time. I'm tired of seeing Arkansas go 6-6 because the problem is that I see the people that are buying into the program, just like I saw with Tennessee, saying, this is our year. And the people behind closed doors say, no, it's not. It's not going to be your year. People think I hate Taylor Green because I didn't have him on my top 10 most exciting player list. I don't have him there because I'm not excited for Arkansas football right now. Why should I be? When everyone else already knows what Arkansas football is this year. It's going to be a team that gets a win that they probably shouldn't, an upset against opponent. They're going to lose a game they probably shouldn't, and they're going to have a couple of close calls that could go either way. That doesn't mean I hate Taylor Green. That doesn't mean that I hate Arkansas. That doesn't mean that I don't think that Arkansas is a program that can be sustainable and, more importantly, one that lasts for the long time. I just want them to be able to have the right direction. And it feels like right now they're stuck in neutral, the same way that Tennessee was for over a decade when they got rid of Philip Fulmer. When Lane Kiffin said after one season, no, USC is calling, I'm going to go out there. When they settled for Derek Dooley, when they settled for Butch Jones, when they settled for Jeremy Pruitt, and they settled for the results that were on the field. It's Arkansas. We've already seen in the last 2 decades that the Hogs can be a program, not just of sustainability, but one that redefines expectations. Bobby Petrino had this team a couple of games away from competing for a national championship in 2011. And now we're sitting here and saying 7-5, 8-4, that's a great year out in Fayetteville. If I had to be the one that comes off as a negative Nancy while I'm watching it, South Carolina is want to make some changes, Oklahoma's want to make some changes, Ole Miss is want to make some changes, Vanderbilt's making some changes, you're watching Missouri's making some changes, and here we are stuck in the natural state, and the only thing natural about it is believing that 9 wins is a good deal. That to me is a negative. So don't hate your team, but you're watching as other programs are willing to make the adjustments, and they're starting to see their actual buy-in be resolved. They're actually getting their investment back in tenfold. And for Arkansas, it's just kind of like sitting here. Like, cool, we'll go to the Liberty Bowl every single year. We'll beat up on a Big 12 team, and then we'll say that next season is the one. When is next season finally actually arriving? And so if I come off as negative when it comes around Arkansas, it's because I'm frustrated for you. I'm frustrated for Texas A&M fans, but I'm really frustrated for Arkansas fans because you watch as this team every single year has complete buy-in from the culture, from the people out in Arkansas, from the people that bleed hog country. And you never get the results because of it. You always just are caught holding the bag, wondering what could have been if we just made a certain number of moves. What could have been if we didn't lose X, Y, and Z player to the portal? What could have been if we decided, hey, finally it's time for us to move off of this head coach. Finally, it's time for us to move up our athletic director. Finally, it's time for us to start treating like football is not a secondary sport out here. Because I understand it. Basketball right now with John Calipari, baseball with Dave Van Horn, you feel like that your team is trending upward in those directions because if you at least have a shot of winning a title. And football, it's just been 6-6 and 4 and 8 and 5 and 7 forever. But I don't want to live in a world where Arkansas is not good at football. So if I come off as negative in the world of Arkansas football, I'm not trying to be. I have nothing negative about any college football program in the SEC. I love all 16 equally, including my own alma mater in Alabama. I just want to see Arkansas actually take that next step forward. Truly believe that they are a team that belongs in the same prominence as other sleepers that are making a jump for the college football playoff run. Had to get my thoughts out on that one. Apologize if I went a little bit too long-winded, but please just know, Arkansas fans, if I ever come to a game out at Razorback Stadium, I'm not coming with negative comments. I'm coming with open arms. I really want to see you actually turn the corner. Okay, so the Luka trade. I want to bring this up, and that's how we're going to close out the show. Please, in the comment section right now, tell me, what do you think is the equivalent of this in the SEC? So when you think about the Luka trade, it makes absolutely no sense. It does. It makes zero sense whatsoever because of the foundation for either team is not currently set. Now, the good news is for Los Angeles, they now have a building block for the long-term future. They got a dude that they can build a franchise around. It's out in Los Angeles. They're willing to spend money. You know that Jeannie Buss is not going to be going away quietly. Rob Pelinka is going to make sure that his team is at least being competitive. But for Dallas, you're trading away a viable and, more importantly, a phenomenal asset that is almost irreplaceable. With on-court demeanor, with positive outlook when it comes to your MVP. This was a team that last year went to the NBA Finals on an improbable run with him as your leader, and you're bringing him in for 31-year-old Anthony Davis, who, when healthy, is probably a top 10 defensive player in basketball, but we don't know if we're getting that absolutely healthy part. So what would be the equivalent trade in the SEC for this type of metric? A team that's trying to turn the corner, put itself in a better position, while the other team was pretty good last year and eventually just wasn't able to get kind of over the hump. I have a few in my head. The first one that comes to mind, the first one that I feel like probably doesn't make a lot of sense to some people, but it does to me, is I'm adding in Garrett Nussmeier to Tennessee, and I'm putting Nico down at LSU. Here's the reason for that. With Nico needs to be a facilitator. He needs to be a point guard. He just needs to get the ball out into the right personnel hands and put himself in a good position to where constantly the offense is taking the next step forward. The weaponry out in Baton Rouge is crazy this year. They have gone ample stockpile when it comes to the personnel. You bring in Barry and Brown. You bring in Nick Anderson. You don't lose Xavier Thomas. You still have Aaron Anderson. You still have Chris Hinton. You bring in Bauer Sharp. You have weapons galore that constantly are going to put you in the right position. And down the stretch, one of the more accurate passers in the SEC was Nico Iamaleava. Now, unfortunately, he didn't have a stable run game in the college football playoff, which is ultimately what factored into a loss when it came to Ohio State, even though I don't think anybody was going to lose that game. When I still look at it is, I see a team that needs to be able to facilitate the football. Just get the ball in playmakers' hands and let them be able to work after the catch. With Garrett Nussmeier, it's all about explosivity plays. It's all about the high upside and the potential. Imagine in this offense, the go-go passing approach for a team like Tennessee with question marks at the wide receiver position, but still some rising names. Chris Brazzell, you have Mike Matthews, you have Staley coming on in, you have Miles Kitsom in there, and the explosiveness takes over. And we get the up-tempo attack. This is a dude that threw for over 4,000 yards last season. This was a guy that led the SEC in passing touchdowns. In total touchdowns. This is a guy that was able to get the job done and put you in a good position to beat up on Ole Miss. And he has his moments, had some negative plays, very negative to the same way we talk about Anthony Davis not being on the court. But imagine now you get Joe Sloan working with Nico Iamaleava and all those weapons around him. And this is a guy that you have for the next 2+ years. And he's only going to get better. It feels like that Tennessee would also benefit because they're getting an upgrade at quarterback, or they're getting a quarterback that they believe is as good, if not better, than what they currently have with Nico. And you bring in other players, and you still have a stable run game with Dylan Sampson. With Star Thomas and Peyton Lewis and Deshaun Bishop and a few other names. And your offensive line is pretty decent next year because of what you brought in via the portal and what you have with younger players coming on in, like David Sanders. And both teams end up benefiting because of it. Now, they have to add in other pieces around them, and I think that's the exact same thing when it comes to Dallas and when it comes to Los Angeles. They got to add in other pieces, but they're in a good spot. I feel like that's a fair trade. I think another one that would make a lot of sense here is if you took, and humor me for a minute, just humor me, if you took DJ Lagway and you put him in Texas and put Arch Manning in Florida, I think it would be the same thing. Because Lagway, untapped potential. We have no idea what we're going to see from this Texas team moving forward. If Arch Manning ends up living up to expectations and is the guy that we envision, Texas is going to be a player for the college football playoff every single year. But if he doesn't, well, then Texas is still going to be a 10-win team. And yeah, they'll go to the postseason and they'll be able to make maybe a run with a win. But that was what it feels like for Dallas with Anthony Davis. Is that, okay, well, you bring in Anthony Davis, you feel really good about the direction that you're going in, and that you have some veterans, but Klay Thompson, and then you also throw in Kyrie Irving, and it's like, yeah, you're going to win a game. You're going to win a series. You're not going to go to the NBA Finals. You're not going to be able to get over the hump. But then you throw Arch in Florida, it's the kind of the same thing. Resetting the tone for Billy Napier moving forward. He's now locked in. This is now your foundation. It's a selling point to everyone to come out to Gainesville and say, hey, our team is going to be better because of what we have with the kid. What we have with 16, Peyton Manning, the lore of what the Manning family was. Arch is everything that we envisioned. And now they're landing 5-star talents. Now they're landing wide receiver help. And now they're landing running back help. And they're bettering the offensive line. And that's the piece moving forward. But what if DJ Lagway hits out in Austin? That's a team that also could win a national championship. I think both those are actually really good comparisons. I would love to know what your comparisons are. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do that on this show because I got to run. I got to get ready to go to New Orleans for the Super Bowl this week. So if you catch me and you live out in New Orleans and you want to talk college football, please do so. Also, next week, starting on, I believe, Wednesdays, we're going to do this. I'm going to talk to Chris about it moving forward. But starting next week, we will do a Q&A. We'll do a questionnaire. So give me your questions either by following me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson, Twitter and Instagram, or emailing us at secunfiltered@gmail.com. We will get your questions online. We'll also get your questions on Twitter, social media, wherever you see fit. And we'll do about a 30-minute segment about what is the future of the SEC. Questions can be about anything. They could be about me. They could be about the SEC. They could be about the future of college football. They could be about teams that we like. We can talk about conferences that really don't matter in the same eyes. Whatever it is. But make sure you get your questions out. When I come back from the Super Bowl, we'll be able to get this done. We're going to start doing a live stream, probably about 25, 30 minutes on a Wednesday night. But that does it for me. I will be back next Sunday right here on Sunday Funday to keep you all caught up with everything that we're doing around the world of college football, because we both know it never sleeps. Like, review, hit subscribe, follow us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me at Mr. Cole Thompson. Check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. And if you haven't already, make sure that you hit the ring notification down below. That way you don't miss a single episode of SEC Unfiltered. But until next time, folks, I am Cole Thompson. Just remember, you only live life once. Might as well enjoy it to the fullest. Peace.